They called it the Rock, a place no one could escape, no one could survive. But what if the real reason Alcatraz was shut down wasn't about money or maintenance? What if it was about something much darker, something that happened inside those cold concrete walls that the government never wanted the world to know? Tonight, we uncover the truth behind the most infamous prison in American history and the secrets buried beneath its walls. Alcatraz sits in the middle of the San Francisco Bay, a lonely rock surrounded by freezing waters, powerful tides, and thick fog. In 1934, it became a federal prison designed to house the worst of the worst: murderers, mobsters, escape artists. Men like Al Capone, George Machine Gun Kelly, and Robert Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz, were all sent here to disappear from the world. To the public, it was the ultimate symbol of control, a fortress where justice ruled with an iron fist. But inside those walls, something else ruled: fear. Every sound echoed. Every door groaned like it was alive. Guards patrolled with the cold precision of soldiers, and prisoners quickly learned that this was not a place built to reform men. It was built to break them. But beneath the daily routine, there were whispers of strange noises in the night, of guards who vanished, of cell blocks that prisoners refused to enter, even under punishment. And as the years went by, those whispers grew louder. By the 1950s, Alcatraz had become more than a prison. It was a psychological experiment in isolation. Each inmate was locked in a cell for 23 hours a day. Meals were eaten alone. Even the sound of waves outside was muted by the thick concrete walls. One inmate, William Baker, who later wrote a memoir, described it as the place where hope comes to die. But not everyone stayed silent. Inmates began to notice patterns. Guards rotating in strange schedules, certain cells sealed off overnight, and maintenance crews arriving after dark. Rumors spread that something was being hidden beneath the prison. Some said it was a secret tunnel system. Others said it was a lab. And a few claimed it was a burial ground for those who never officially died. But the truth, as records later hinted, was that the government was using Alcatraz for more than just incarceration. Documents declassified decades later revealed that certain experiments in psychological conditioning were quietly approved within the Bureau of Prisons. Alcatraz became one of the testing grounds. One former guard, who later broke his silence under anonymity, said, "They weren't just locking men away. They were testing how long a man could stay sane in total isolation, and some didn't make it." June 11th, 1962, 3 men vanished from Alcatraz. Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin. They dug through the walls with homemade tools, built a raft from raincoats, and disappeared into the fog. To this day, the official story claims they drowned in the bay. But not everyone believed that. One guard, Officer Richard Barkley, who worked the night shift during the escape, claimed he saw something that never made it into the official report. He said he heard screams, not from the escapees, but from inside the prison. When he rushed to investigate, he found that 2 cells in D block, which had been empty for months, were open. The lights were flickering, and the cell doors were covered in scratches. But no one was inside. A week later, Barkley resigned and disappeared from public record. Years later, his daughter revealed a sealed letter addressed to the Department of Justice. It simply read, "Alcatraz wasn't shut down because of money. It was shut down because it was haunted by what we did to those men." By 1963, the island had become a symbol of failure. The salt air corroded everything: pipes, cells, even the steel bars. It cost over $10 per inmate per day, 3 times what it cost at any other prison. But according to internal memos uncovered years later, that wasn't the only reason they shut it down. One report, dated February 1963, mentioned a containment breach. No context, no details, just 2 words and an entire section redacted. That same month, 3 guards were transferred to military facilities under medical evaluation. And by March, Alcatraz was officially closed. The inmates were quietly relocated, and the island was abandoned. No press conference, no warning, no answers. In 1973, the prison reopened, not for inmates, but for tourists. But what the public never knew was that not every part of the island was accessible. D Block, the most feared section, was closed off for safety reasons. Yet visitors reported hearing footsteps, voices, and the sound of clanging bars coming from behind the sealed doors. Park rangers dismissed it as echoes. But in 1984, a maintenance worker went missing while repairing electrical systems beneath the old mess hall. When his body was found 2 days later, the coroner's report listed no cause of death. His face, according to witnesses, was frozen in a silent scream. After that, the underground maintenance tunnels were sealed permanently. The government called Alcatraz a failed experiment. But maybe it was something else entirely. Maybe they shut it down not because they couldn't control the inmates, but because they couldn't control what they created. For decades, the story of Alcatraz's shutdown stayed simple. Too expensive, too old, too isolated. But when journalist Ella Navarro received a box of declassified documents in 1998 under Freedom of Information Act, she realized the truth was far more disturbing. Inside the box were brittle memos, handwritten notes from wardens, and 3 photographs, all stamped restricted, internal use only. One memo, dated October 17, 1962, mentioned something called Operation Echo. The wording was vague, but referred to behavioral resilience trials conducted in Cell Block D, also known as a hole. Prisoners were subjected to complete darkness for days. No sound, no human contact, only silence and their own thoughts. Navarro's voice recording from her 2003 documentary. One guard's report said a prisoner was left in isolation for 6 days. When they opened the cell, the man was still sitting upright, but his pulse had stopped. He was dead, eyes wide open, staring at the door. When Navarro tried to locate the guard who wrote that report, she discovered he died in 1974. His cause of death was listed as suicide, but no weapon, no note, and no witness were ever found. That's when she uncovered something even stranger. The same memo referenced a civilian consultant who visited the island 6 times between 1961 and 1963. Identified only as Dr. C. Halvorsen. There are no employment records, no payroll entries. But a 1962 visitor log shows his name signed beside a single word, Echo. So who was Dr. Halvorsen? Navarro traced his name back to government research programs in the 1950s, including MKUltra, the CIA's infamous psychological control project. She found out Halvorsen specialized in sensory deprivation studies. His goal? To understand how long a human mind could endure absolute isolation before it began to break or adapt. Alcatraz was the perfect environment. Documents suggested that certain prisoners were secretly selected for evaluation, promised early release in exchange for participation. None of them were ever released. Their records ended abruptly, as if they'd never existed. Navarro's taped narration. These weren't criminals anymore. They were subjects. And Alcatraz wasn't just a prison. It was a laboratory. And that's when the strange occurrences began. Guards reported men speaking in languages they didn't know. Others woke up screaming about the walls breathing. One guard claimed he heard a voice whispering through the ventilation shafts, repeating the word, echo. Even the warden at the time, Olin Blackwell, wrote in his final report, "The situation in D Block has deteriorated beyond control. Recommend immediate closure and reassignment of staff. The prisoners are changing." That report was dated February 22, 1963, just 3 weeks before Alcatraz was shut down for good. On March 15, 1963, guards conducted what would become the final head count at Alcatraz. But according to internal testimony, the numbers didn't match. 3 prisoners were unaccounted for. Not the Anglin brothers or Frank Morris, but others who were supposed to be in isolation. Their names were blacked out in every document Navarro received. Instead, the line beside their cells simply read, "Cleared." That same night, the facility was placed on a level 4 lockdown, the highest possible alert. Electrical power was cut to half the island. A military transport arrived at dawn carrying unmarked crates. When the lockdown ended, 48 hours later, the prison was silent. The next morning, Warden Blackwell submitted his resignation. He left San Francisco and was never seen again. Officially, the island ceased operations due to high maintenance costs. Unofficially, it became the most tightly sealed piece of land in American history. Fast forward to 2011, a group of filmmakers obtained permission to shoot a documentary, Inside Alcatraz, after hours. Among them was Ryan Kessler, a sound engineer who specialized in capturing ambient noise for films. But during the third night of filming, he noticed something strange. His recording equipment picked up a low, rhythmic pulse, like a human heartbeat, coming from beneath the floor D block. At first, they thought it was interference. But when they isolated the track, the pulse formed a pattern, a series of 3 beats, followed by a pause. The same pattern was labeled ECHO in Dr. Halvorson's original experiment notes. That night, all of Kessler's equipment failed. Cameras glitched, batteries drained, and one crew member claimed to see a man standing behind the cell doors. But when he looked again, the corridor was empty. The footage was never released. Kessler disappeared 2 months later during a solo dive near the island's shore. His body was never recovered, but his waterproof recorder washed ashore 3 days later. The final clip on it was 6 seconds long. A whisper, barely audible, repeating the words, "They never left." When Ella Navarro died in 2019, her daughter found one last envelope in her files, marked, "For release only if I don't make it." Inside was a single photo, a concrete room, walls covered in faint writing, and a date carved into the stone, March 21st, 1963. Below it one phrase, "The experiment continues." Navarro's note read, "Alcatraz wasn't shut down because it failed. It was shut down because it worked." So maybe that's the real reason the rock was abandoned. Not because of escape attempts, not because of cost, but because somewhere in those tunnels, in the dark, something happened that no one could ever explain. Something still echoing to this day. Sound of wind howling through empty corridors, a faint heartbeat fading into silence. History tells us Alcatraz was just a prison. But stories like these remind us that some walls are built not to keep people in, but to keep something out. Maybe the real reason they shut down Alcatraz is because what they created couldn't be contained anymore. Cue slow cinematic music. Dissolve the drone footage of Alcatraz at sunset.